Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar titled Navigating the Spotted Lanternfly Buzz, Separating Science from Sensation. My name is Madeline Potter, and I'm a faculty specialist for entomology and integrated pest management with the University of Maryland Extension Home and Garden Information Center. My role is to educate the public and to train University of Maryland faculty, staff, and volunteers on topics such as beneficial insect conservation and sustainable insect pest management. A little bit more about me is I am an alumna from University of Maryland, earning a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Horticulture and a Master of Science in Entomology. If you are new to University of Maryland Extension, I highly encourage you to check out our website shown and linked here on the right of your screen. We have multiple different types of programs ranging from youth with 4-H, family and consumer sciences, agriculture and food systems, and environment and natural resources. Part of our mission as University of Maryland Extension is to extend new knowledge learned at the university and other research-based institutions to the public to improve people's lives. As we get started with today's presentation, I want to put up the university's assurance statement. I would like to show the Injustice for All poster. As we receive funding from the federal government, we want to make sure that you find our programs accessible. So if you have any questions about programming and the accessibility of today's program or other programs with University of Maryland Extension, you can reach out to us directly or to the contacts listed on this poster. As an organization that partners with local, state, and federal government, we are required to collect demographic information on our program participants. This is a self-identification survey, which is optional and anonymous. So we keep this confidential, and it's completely optional for you to fill out this self-identification survey. So I'm going to launch that survey now through Zoom. If you are watching this at a different time, no worries about filling out this poll, but thank you for attending. So I want to begin with how this presentation was created, at least in my mind, and it surrounds this theme of invasive species in the media. Now, especially when we're talking about spotted lanternfly, we have likely seen spotted lanternfly in the media in some shape or form, or maybe we're experiencing spotted lanternfly in our own green spaces. When we see especially invasive species, there's usually a lot of drama involved when it comes to the media. We see some different examples of headlines and posters shown here for things like the spotted lanternfly, the northern giant hornet, sometimes known as the murder hornet, and then things like our Joro spider we may have heard of in the spring or early summer. And so a lot of these headlines with the media, the goal is to get as many views, clicks, and interactions as possible. And with this, usually when we click on that link or we read an article or a video, there usually isn't very much helpful information involved, especially when it comes to ways to manage an invasive species and getting that science-based information. We've even seen with some media outlets that they're portraying incorrect information or information that is not science-based. So it's important to keep in mind what stories we are telling. Whether we know it or not, we are all science communicators in some shape or form, whether that be we are an educator ourselves working with an institution or volunteer program, or if we're interacting with the public through sharing different social media posts or even through word of mouth. So it really matters what information you share and spread with your peers, especially when it comes to things like our invasive species. This all leads to a lot of our media is sensationalizing, and this means to present information about something in a way that provokes public interest and excitement, but at the expense of accuracy. So that's what leads us to today, is learning to separate the science from the sensation. And I found this really great resource through Harvard University, and these were some of the takeaways I won't go into too much detail today on this, but you can see on our screen some general guidelines along the tops and some tips for helping people navigate all the media and information that's accessible out there, but to be able to pick out that science-based accurate information. So today we'll focus on the general guideline along the top, number 3, utilize and share credible science-based information. And today we're going to do this for the spotted lanternfly. So we'll start with a pre-presentation survey if you're joining us live for this presentation to get a baseline of where our knowledge is at for this particular species of insect. So an overview of what we'll talk about today in relation to the spotted lanternfly. We'll start with what is spotted lanternfly, getting into what type of damage spotted lanternfly causes, where it is spreading and is being found, and then we'll conclude with different spotted lanternfly management tactics. So what are spotted lanternflies? Spotted lanternflies are insects related to other insects like cicadas, tree hoppers, spittlebugs, and leaf hoppers. These are all commonly found naturally in our environments, and they're all related to this particular invasive species, spotted lanternfly. Spotted lanternfly is a type of plant hopper that belongs to the insect family Phlegoridae, commonly known as lanternflies. So pictured on the screen here are other species of lanternflies. We can see they can be really colorful, especially on the wings. A lot of them have this elongated fronds, which is this area of the front of the face that makes them look like they may have a long nose or snout. And they're generally found in other areas outside of the United States throughout the world. But we do have a species of lanternfly that is native to North America and can be found specifically in Maryland, native to here. So we can see on the bottom right, the black colored lanternfly doesn't have a common name, but we can see its species listed there. And this is native to the United States, found in Maryland, and generally feeds on sumac and red maple. So this tells us that our environments aren't completely unfamiliar with this group of insects called lanternflies. But spotted lanternfly, this particular species, is non-native to our area in North America and to Maryland. Spotted lanternfly is native to areas of Eastern Asia, and it has become an invasive pest in areas like Japan, South Korea, and the United States. We're now going to take a look at the different life stages of spotted lanternfly. It's really important to know how to identify this particular species at its different life stages. So spotted lanternfly has 3 main life stages we'll take a look at. The first we can see on the left side of our screen, which is the egg stage. So spotted lanternfly eggs are laid in a cluster known as an egg mass and covered typically with this mud-like covering over the top. Once these eggs hatch, we'll see in the middle of our screen the immature stages of spotted lanternfly, also known as nymphs. And we have 4 different nymphal stages. We can see they get bigger with each stage. We call these instars with these particular insects. And so these are the different stages between molts. So this insect molts between these stages, they get bigger and bigger. And we can see with that 4th nymphal instar stage, it turns a red color. Then once it molts after this 4th instar, it becomes an adult. We can see pictured on the right side of our screen. We can see the adult has 2 pairs of wings. Unlike that immature stage, they do not have a full pair of wings yet. But with our adults, we see those pairs of wings with its different distinctive patterns. Now, before we take a closer look at these different life stages to learn more about identification, we'll look at a general life cycle, pairing it with different times of year. Spotted lanternfly has 1 generation per year, so that means that it goes through this particular life cycle 1 time per year. There are some insect species that go through multiple generations, so they go through this life cycle multiple times throughout, say, growing season or the warm times of our year. We can even have overlapping generations. But when it comes to spotted lanternfly, we just see 1 generation per year. So we have this life cycle illustrated by Penn State University. At the time of year of this presentation, we are in August, coming up on September. And so we are seeing adults this time of year. We'll begin to see them laying egg masses on different surfaces. And then come spring for Maryland, typically around mid to late April is when we'll see these first hatches of the eggs. And then we'll see the first instars or nymphal stages emerge. They'll go through those 4 nymphal stages and then reach their adult stage around July, and then repeat the process again. So taking a look at our first life stage, which is our egg stage, our egg masses, each egg mass consists of 30 to 50 individual eggs. And as I said earlier, eggs are typically covered by a mud-like covering. This helps to protect the eggs from different weather conditions, maybe predators, or even from desiccation from drying out. Now, since they are laid outdoors in their natural habitats, they can experience different weather conditions. They can experience predation. So the egg masses can look a little bit different over time. So we have 4 different types of egg masses where they can either be uncovered, partially covered, fully covered, or even weathered over time, especially because they spend the winter months in this egg mass stage. Egg masses are generally about 1 inch in length. Looking at the immature stages, you can see pictured on our left, sizing in the 4 different nymphal instars. In the middle, we have a picture for size reference. These are the first or possibly second instar stage on a plant stem. And you can see for size reference, my thumb in that picture. And then we have zoomed in close on a 4th instar on our top right with that red coloration on the body and some black and white patterns. And then on our bottom right, this is zoomed in on a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd instar nymph where they have a black coloration with white spots. With our spotted lanternfly adults, we see what they look like holding their wings at rest over the back of their body on our top left. And so we can see even the outside top 4 wings have a distinctive pattern to them where we see up toward the head, we'll have these big black spots. And then we have smaller elongated patterns of spots toward the distal end or the end of their wings. Once they open those wings up, we can see the bottom pair, the hind pair of wings, which have a distinctive red coloration. The adults themselves, just like their egg masses, are about 1 inch in length. Now, both the immature and the adult stages of spotted lanternfly can be very jumpy. We may have seen this ourselves. If we get near a spotted lanternfly, they have long legs, and so they can jump or hop pretty far. Our immature stage of spotted lanternflies don't have fully developed wings, so they can't fly, but at this adult stage, they can fly. Here's an image showing several adult spotted lanternflies on a tree trunk. So we can see how with their wings at rest, they can really blend into their surroundings, especially when it comes to different tree bark. When it comes to a pest insect, it's important to learn about what type of mouthparts a particular species has because this clues us in on what type of damage it may be causing to our landscapes and our plants. So spotted lanternflies have a straw-like mouthpart, sometimes known as a piercing, sucking mouthpart. This is not unique to spotted lanternflies. There are lots of different types of insects naturally within our landscapes native to our area that have this straw-like mouthpart. Things like our cicadas, plant hoppers, tree hoppers, leaf hoppers, etc. And so a common misconception is that spotted lanternflies are chewing our plants, but they cannot physically do this as they have a straw-like mouthpart. So if we start with our picture on our left, we can see an adult spotted lanternfly. I'll go ahead and bring my laser pointer on the screen. And so this is the head of our spotted lanternfly adult. We have the 2 eyes here. The yellowy orange appendages right underneath each eye are short bulbous antennae that we're seeing. And then in the middle of the eyes and the antenna, we have what we call our head capsule. And coming down from our head capsule, we have this straw-like mouthpart, which is a bundle of stylets that help to pierce tissue and suck up plant sap. And so we can highlight that in this white circle we can see appendage coming down from the face. And then our picture on our right is scanning electron micrographs, where we can see in more detail the head capsule and then the straw-like mouth part coming down from that head capsule. So what damage do spotted lanternflies cause? So as we've just learned, our spotted lanternflies have this straw-like mouth part, and they use this to feed on plant sap, specifically plant sap from plant phloem, which is a type of vascular tissue in our plants. Our spotted lanternflies remain above ground, so they're feeding on vascular tissue involved with our leaves and our stems. So we have a diagram of a plant on our left, and we're going to take a look at the phloem and where it's located on our leaves on our top left. And then on our bottom center, we see where phloem is located in our stem structures. So circled in blue is where our phloem is located. So this is part of the plant's vascular tissue. So our spotted lanternflies using that straw-like mouth part, piercing the plant tissue, whether that be on leaves or stems, and then going down toward that phloem to access the plant sap that is in this phloem tissue. Spotted lanternfly feeds on sap from 56 or more plant taxa. So this is just what we've recorded so far. It's likely more plant taxa than this. So a spotted lanternfly has a very wide host range. There are relatively few records of feeding on herbaceous taxa, but as we'll see later in the presentation, they do feed on different herbaceous plants. Tree of Heaven tends to be a preferred host. So you may be wondering what Tree of Heaven is and or why spotted lanternfly prefers to feed on this species. Well, Tree of Heaven is an invasive species itself. It is a type of tree, and it was brought over from China as an ornamental plant in the 1700s. It is found in just about every state of the United States. In Maryland, it's fairly extensive. You can find it just about anywhere, even the sides of highways. And it's from the same areas of Asia as spotted lanternfly. So spotted lanternfly has co-evolved with this plant. It's used to feeding on it. And so we generally think this is typically why we are seeing this spotted lanternfly preferring to feed on Tree of Heaven. With the behaviors of spotted lanternfly, we are observing spotted lanternfly moving between plants and habitats. So they generally don't stay on one particular plant for a long period of time. What we're observing is spotted lanternfly changing host plants at different life stages, especially. So to date, based on the data and observations we've collected so far, I've created this general table to show by the spotted lanternfly life stage what type of plant tissue and plant host range we're observing it having. And so we'll start on our first column, which shows the spotted lanternfly life stage. We'll start with those young nymphs, which are first through third instars. And we're generally seeing this, or they require tender plant tissue. They're young, they have a young straw-like mouth part, so they're feeding on herbaceous tissue or new shoots and growth on our woody plants. So they require this tender plant tissue. And generally, we're seeing an observed wide host range at this stage. Then as they get up to that fourth and final nymphal stage or instar, we're seeing them now have a more developed mouth part. They're targeting woody tissue now, so they're piercing through bark on branches and trunks. They may also still be feeding on some herbaceous plants. And this is where we typically have been seeing so far a narrowing of their host range. So maybe they're moving more toward those woody plants, may have more nutrients within their phloem, depending on the plant species. And then we're also seeing this with our adults, typically feeding on our woody plants, some of our herbaceous plants as well, with that observed narrowing host range compared to their early young instars. Again, this can change with more research, but this is just what we're seeing to date now. Even though spotted lanternfly has a very wide host range, again, so far over 56 or more recorded plant taxa, we have seen some observed favorite plant species. And so we have two different charts here. On our left, we have favorite plant species of our immature spotted lanternfly nymphs. And then on our right, we have some favorite host plants of spotted lanternfly adults. And we see some similarities such as grapevines for both the immature and adult spotted lanternfly, tree of heaven, black walnut, and styrax. But we are seeing with our nymphs, they especially like roses cultivated in multiflora. And with our adults, we're finding them on red maple and silver maple as some of their favorites, as well as river birch, willow, and sumac. Now, with this feeding, what type of damage does it cause? Well, so far we found spotted lanternfly feeding is a plant stressor. To date, spotted lanternfly feeding has only been recording killing grapevines, tree of heaven, and black walnut saplings, so young trees. So for a lot of the other plant species in our landscape, we are not seeing plant death because of spotted lanternfly feeding. It is a plant stressor from what we've seen so far. Spotted lanternfly generally only feeds on herbaceous plants for a short period of time before moving to another plant. And spotted lanternfly is typically found at forest edges, not deep or throughout a forest. So on that forest edge, where they may, as we've learned, move to another habitat or to another plant. That may be a vineyard, it may be a residential or community landscape. So we want to make sure that we do not assume all plant damage we are seeing is caused by spotted lanternfly. We may see this quite a bit where we find some sort of insect on our plant and we are quick to assume that particular insect is causing any damage we're seeing. But throughout our landscape, we have lots of different insect species, animal species. We have other factors such as diseases, weather conditions that can lead or contribute to plant health decline. And typically when our plant health is declining, it's a combination of multiple things. So reminding ourselves and the general public that we can't always assume if our plant is dying or not doing too well that it's because of spotted lanternfly. So let's take a look at a worst case scenario of spotted lanternfly feeding. This recent study that was done evaluated the impacts of long-term feeding by different densities of spotted lanternfly that were confined or caged in with multi-tree enclosures. Each enclosure contained 3 different species of trees over a period of 4 years. And so to choose from, they selected from 4 different plant species. Each particular enclosure included 3 of these species, so different combinations of tree of heaven, weeping willow, silver maple, and river birch. It's important to note that all of the trees that were included in this study were saplings or young trees. So not mature, well-established trees, but young trees. So we have this worst case scenario. We have trees caged in with spotted lanternflies for 4 years in a row. Now, what did they find? First thing is no trees died in this study as a result of spotted lanternfly feeding, even with being caged in with these plants for 4 years. So they kept adding each year in a new batch of spotted lanternfly, and they didn't see tree death. Long-term feeding over these 4 consecutive field seasons did reduce diameter growth and below-ground starch storage in roots, and it also reduced nutrients essential for photosynthesis and growth in leaves. So this makes sense, right? Our pest insect spotted lanternfly using that straw-like mouthpart, tapping into the phloem, extracting nutrients. So it's to be expected that we'll see some sort of effect from this. But when they found spotted lanternfly feeding pressure was the lowest, they had a drop in population levels in these particular cages, maybe spotted lanternfly died off. Silver maple and willow recovered with greater diameter growth. So this is a worst case scenario study. As we've learned in our natural environments, our trees aren't caged in with spotted lanternflies, and we see this observed behavior of spotted lanternfly moving between particular plants and moving between habitats. We'll now take a look at the effect of spotted lanternfly feeding on different fruit and vegetable and production crops. Now, this is preliminary data that are from researchers at Penn State University, Holly Shugart and Julie Urban. So they were kind enough to share these preliminary results with me. This research is still ongoing and there are larger sample sizes needed, but we can observe some patterns and clue us into some crops to be aware of when it comes to spotted lanternfly. So our first table on our left shows first through third instar nymph survivorship and damage. So they not only took a look at different damages from spotted lanternfly, but if they could survive on a particular plant or crop species. So on our first column, we have the different hosts they tested, survivorship, documented damage, and then anticipated risk of damage from spotted lanternflies. So we're first taking a look at these really young nymphal stages on these particular hosts. And what we're seeing here is that we don't know so far for strawberries and blueberries, the anticipated risk, the results weren't clear. But what we're seeing with things like hops and cucumbers, we have a low risk of damage from the nymphs. And then with pumpkin, watermelon, sunflower, and tomato, we have no anticipated risk and no observed damage. Now on our right, we'll take a look at the older nymphs, so this fourth and final instar. And we have our hosts on our left, survivorship once again, documented damage and anticipated risk. Two crops to highlight include peach, where they saw fruit drop in defoliation with a medium high anticipated risk. And then with cucumbers, a reduction in yield with a medium to low risk. So two plants to be aware of when it comes to that fourth or older nymphal stage for spotted lanternfly. We'll now look at adults. So a similar layout with our chart here. We have our hosts, survivorship, documented damage, and anticipated risk. So we'll take a look at some things to highlight. Again, we're seeing peach with fruit drop and defoliation, medium to high risk with our adults. And then with our different grapes, we're seeing defoliation and vine necrosis with a medium high to high anticipated risk. And then with our hops, minor yield reduction, defoliation, and vine necrosis with a medium to high anticipated risk, but they saw that it did recover well. So with more research, I am sure we will see more data and some more information on documented damage and anticipated risk when it comes to these different life stages on different fruit and vegetable and production crops. Now, other than feeding damage, there's another type of damage that spotted lanternflies can cause. And to clue us in on what this type of damage is, I will play this short video. This video was taken by entomologist Michael Raup with the University of Maryland, and we can see we're zooming in on a few adult spotted lanternflies on a tree trunk. And if we look closely, we can see something going on where they're excreting something, some liquid substance out the back. So what they're excreting is known as honeydew, which is a byproduct of their feeding. Now, excreting honeydew is not unique to spotted lanternflies. Insects that tap into the plant sap, whether that be through the vascular phloem or xylem tissue, tend to excrete this honeydew. It's their byproduct, it's their excrement. So things like cicadas can do this, plant hoppers, tree hoppers, and so on. And honeydew is a sugary liquid waste excretion. And I like to say, if you're walking under a tree and you feel some drips dropping down on you, it may be this honeydew dripping down, especially when we have a large collection of plant sap feeding insects on a plant. And so this honeydew can look like sugary or sticky liquid on the surface of a leaf, as we can see on the center of our screen. So if we're able to touch it, it would be pretty sticky. Now, with this honeydew does result in some different types of damage or some negative things that could occur, such as attracting other insects and such as wasps and bees. So wherever a spotted lanternfly is feeding or even resting, they could be excreting this honeydew and dripping it down on any sort of surface below, whether that be a plant or an object. So with this sugary substance, it could attract our bees and wasps. It could also lead to mold growth, very sugary, and typically grows what's called sooty mold. We can see what that looks like darkened on the plant leaf surface here. So these dark areas, this dark substance on these leaves is what's called sooty mold. So honeydew had dripped down and sooty mold is growing. And this can affect plant photosynthesis. And then on our right, we see a photo of a tree trunk, a collection of spotted lanternfly adults along the bottom. They must have excreted a lot of honeydew because we see this white mold growth all around the base of this tree. Honeydew can also stain and damage objects, whether it be falling down onto the surface of a car or a windshield, or dropping down onto our sidewalks that can sometimes stain certain surfaces, or even be very difficult to remove. So now that we've learned about what spotted lanternflies are, how they feed, what type of damage they can cause, whether that be through their feeding or through the excretion of honeydew, let's now take a look at where spotted lanternflies are in the eastern United States. Spotted lanternfly was first detected in the United States in 2014 in Berks County, Pennsylvania. For the state of Maryland, it was first found in October of 2018 in Cecil County. Here we have a map of spotted lanternfly distribution in the eastern United States. This map was last updated July 31st of 2024. And we can see the areas highlighted or colored in blue indicate where a spotted lanternfly infestation is present. So this is more than just a few sightings. We have a designated infestation. The areas outlined in red are where internal state quarantine areas are located. We'll talk about that in a little bit and what that means for the state of Maryland. And then it's a little difficult to see since we're zoomed out so far to see all the states affected, but the tiny purple dots indicate individual finds of spotted lanternfly. So areas where we don't have a full-on infestation, but we are finding spotted lanternflies. So we can see spotted lanternfly is currently found in 17 states and counting as it continues to spread. Zooming on the state of Maryland, we'll look at spotted lanternfly population status. And we have the key for this map on the bottom left corner where we're seeing spotted lanternfly population in each Maryland county. And so the gradient of the red color shows the level of infestation. With the darker the red, the more spotted lanternflies are present. And then the lighter the red, the less spotted lanternflies are present, at least through their documentations at the Maryland Department of Agriculture. We can see the gray counties such as St. Mary's County, Dorchester, Somerset, and Worcester are where we haven't found infestations of spotted lanternfly at the time this map was created in May of 2024. We are indicating with our purple star that we're finding individual finds of spotted lanternfly in St. Mary's County. Now, if you're curious to learn about where specifically in each county spotted lanternfly is being found, you could check out inaturalist.org and filter out certain counties within your area to see where people are reporting individual finds. Now that we know where spotted lanternfly is, how can we manage spotted lanternflies within our own green spaces? One of today's key messages that I want you to take away from today's presentation and to let others know is that there are multiple ways to manage spotted lanternfly. A lot of people tend to quickly turn to chemicals or pesticides, especially with the emotion and fear that is being evoked from learning about spotted lanternfly for the first time, especially through our media sources. And so I want you to know that there are multiple ways to manage it, and there's no right or wrong way to manage spotted lanternfly as well. Today's different management tactics that I will go through are geared toward home and community gardeners. So if you are a commercial grower or you work with commercial growers, you can feel free to reach out to me by email after watching today's presentation for those management tactic guidelines. But again, I'll repeat, today's management guidelines are for home and community gardeners. Now, there may be more management tactics than what's presented today, but these are the main ones that we have currently found are being used and have been researched so far. So we're organizing management tactics by things we can do year-round, shown on our left, and things on our right that we do by season and or the spotted lanternfly life stage, which are linked, and we'll see in a little bit. So we'll first start with things we can do year-round. Year-round, we can monitor and report any and all life stages of spotted lanternfly. Now, this is going to vary by what state you're in. So if you're in the state of Maryland, the Maryland Department of Agriculture hosts the reporting system, which is an online form. If you're in a different state, I would check in with your local Department of Agriculture to see where reporting is being done, or if there's even an online form set up quite yet. It's going to really depend. We want to report any life stage, so it could be from an egg mass to a nymph to an adult and where we are finding it. And this is very valuable data, so we can learn more about phenology, so what time of year we're seeing each life stage, as this can vary with climate change, and also give us a small sense of population level. This is really hard to track, and it's also going to depend on how many people actually report, but it's still important data and can teach us something about where to keep an eye on different high levels of spotted lanternfly. Now, for the state of Maryland, the form used to say that they didn't want reports from certain counties, but this has changed as of today's presentation date. So no matter what county you're in, it's important to report when you can. When it comes to the state of Maryland, there are quarantine areas. And so this map shows the different quarantine areas by Maryland County. Any county that it has a shade of purple indicates there's a quarantine in place between the years of 2019 and 2024. So the different colors of purple indicate the year that the quarantine was established. So the areas we haven't established a quarantine yet include counties such as St. Mary's, Dorchester, Somerset, and Worcester as of May of 2024. So it's important to keep up to date with this information and check in with the Maryland Department of Agriculture or the University of Maryland Extension webpage on spotted lanternfly. So what does this quarantine area indicate? The Secretary of Agriculture has issued a quarantine order for 19 Maryland counties and Baltimore City. This means businesses and institutions are required to have a permit if they move regulated articles from or within the quarantine area. To learn more, go to the Maryland Department of Agriculture to learn about these permits, and it will list out the different regulated articles. Now, why are these quarantine areas in place? Well, transportation by human activity is the most common form of movement and the main reason spotted lanternfly populations have spread significant distances. So as a general public member, as someone working with or are home and community gardeners, it's important to realize that we can make a difference by reducing the chances of spread, checking items such as vehicles, recreation or camping equipment, outdoor household items, building materials, yard and garden, children's toys before we move them between quarantine areas or even outside those quarantine areas. So no matter the life stage, egg masses can be laid on just about any surfaces and hitchhike outside of a quarantine area, or it could be an active life stage, the immatures or the adults, taking a ride on your car, on your tires, or any sort of item you may have with you. The Maryland Department of Agriculture has this great checklist for residents living in areas with spotted lanternfly, where it reminds you of different items to check so you can reduce the spread of spotted lanternfly. Now that we've learned about things we can do year-round, we'll take a look at different management tactics by season and or spotted lanternfly life stage. So to do this, we have up on the screen a general annual timeline of the spotted lanternfly life stages. And overlaying on top, we'll talk about the different management tactics. So this is generally when we'd recommend to use these tactics to target specific life stages. And so as of the date of this presentation, August going into September, we're going to look at management tactics in this green box in the center of our screen. So these are things we generally recommend from April through November. And then getting into our cold winter months from December through the beginning of April, we have different management tactics outlined in our blue box. So I highly encourage you to reference back to this part of the presentation to know when to take these management tactics, or if you're working with clients or general public members, you can recommend this as well. With sustainable insect pest management, it's important to target specific life stages as different management tactics are more effective for different life stages of that insect. So we're going to walk through each of these. We'll start with scraping spotted lanternfly egg masses. So on the left, we have pictures of different places the egg masses can be found: fence posts, tires, outdoor furniture, fencing, or different wood objects. I've even seen them laid on outdoor light bulbs, so just about anywhere. And when we're removing them using any sort of scraping object, so that could be a card, a hard plastic card, or on our right, we see someone using a plastic clothing tag, scraping off that egg mass into a container to destroy it, whether that be a container of soapy water or alcohol. With egg masses located in trees, unfortunately, the research so far has shown on average 90% of the egg masses that are laid in trees are not reachable. So they're above 10 feet. And so the ones we can reach on average is only about 2% of the egg masses that are laid. And so we do not recommend climbing ladders or trees to be able to scrape and reach these egg masses, but it clues us in on if we're taking management tactics against spotted lanternfly that we're going to use a combination of different tactics, not just scraping egg masses, as most of them are going to be unreachable and inaccessible to remove. Talking about netting. So this is a viable option potentially for our home and community gardeners. This is not as viable for our commercial growers on a larger scale, as netting itself can be pretty pricey when we're talking about a large operation and the labor involved in installing and maintaining it. But if you're a home or community gardener, you can target those vulnerable plants. What that means may be a favorite plant, as we've observed and learned for our spotted lanternflies, or some of our crops such as our cucumbers, peaches, grapes, or hops that we want to protect. And so making sure to check the plant first, removing any spotted lanternflies that might be present, especially those egg masses, and installing a fine breathable mesh. We want to make sure that we're not suffocating our plants, we're allowing light to come through, and it's breathable. Openings less than 1/8 of an inch, because 1/8 of an inch is about the size of that first stage immature instar of our spotted lanternfly. And tightly securing the sides and the bottom. So we make sure we have no spotted lanternfly getting in. It's important to monitor the netting over time, checking in on it regularly to make sure we haven't trapped spotted lanternfly or other insects inside, as well as we're not trapping other animals that may be walking or flying by. If you want a video tutorial on how to install netting, there was one created for the brood axe periodical cicada emergence that works well for any sort of netting we want to apply to a tree. And so you can take a look at that linked on the bottom left side of your screen. Tree of Heaven removal. Since we've learned that Tree of Heaven tends to be a preferred host plant for spotted lanternfly, and it is an invasive species itself, generally competing with our native species, we can consider removing it from our landscapes and the properties that we own. So Tree of Heaven can be difficult to remove, but luckily I've heard from a lot of general public members that they have had luck in removing it when they do it properly. And so We can't just cut down Tree of Heaven. It can grow back from cut roots. So we have to use cutting with a combination of a systemic herbicide. So an herbicide that can move through the vascular system of our plants. The herbicide is generally recommended to be applied mid to late summer, following all label directions. Now, if you're interested in removing Tree of Heaven, I highly encourage you to check out the extension page at University of Maryland that we have on Tree of Heaven, as we have lots of science-based guidelines and tutorials on how to properly remove it. Spotted lanternfly traps. If we're considering a spotted lanternfly trap, it's important to install it properly and also to maintain it. Sticky traps and bands are generally not recommended due to the risk of trapping non-target animals, as we can unfortunately see with our photo on our top right, where we had a woodpecker stuck to one of these sticky traps. If we are using a sticky trap, we need to use some sort of protective mesh or caging so we can exclude these non-target animals. Now, this won't exclude everything. As you can imagine, anything that can fly or crawl onto the sticky surface, such as other pollinators or beneficial insects, can get trapped and die on the sticky trap itself. Traps in high spot lanternfly areas need to be changed out every 24 hours, as our researchers have seen. So they can require a lot of maintenance. If our traps get full, they lose their effectiveness and they can't continue to trap spot lanternflies. So the effectiveness, I should say, varies. So consider it carefully if we do want to use some sort of trap. Be mindful of non-target animals and be careful with installation and making sure to maintain it properly. If you are interested in trapping, I recommend checking out the Penn State extension page on how to build a spotted lanternfly circle trap, linked on the bottom right of your screen. Squishing spotted lanternflies. There have been a lot of campaigns to see it and squish it when it comes to this invasive species. But there are a lot of lookalikes out there, and we're not all trained in insect identification. And you may be surprised about how many different species can look fairly similar. Some of these insect species are beneficial insects. Now, our insect species need our help when it comes to conservation. They play very important roles within our environment. And so if we're squishing them, we are affecting the different services they provide, such as pollination and natural pest control. So learning about what spotted lanternfly looks like at its different life stages is important, as you are doing today. So if you're working with other people, talking to a peer, and they're interested in squishing spotted lanternfly, make sure they know how to properly identify it. We can see some lookalikes here on the screen, some moths, which are really important for pollination, as well as some predatory insects that provide sustainable pest control, such as our predatory stink bugs and our assassin bugs like our wheel bugs. If you ever need help with identification when it comes to insects, we encourage you to take a photo and send it to us at UMD Ask Extension. This is a free service and we can help you with that identification. We can also get creative with how we physically remove spotted lanternflies from certain areas. The Temple University Eye Eco Lab created a viral video showing people how they can use an empty plastic water bottle with a spotted lanternfly adult that's landed on a surface, putting that water bottle opening over the top of the adult insect. And because of their jumping behavior, they'll tend to jump back into that water bottle. So we don't have to touch the insect. And this is one way that they found you can collect adults or even nymphs. There's different parks departments and even our own Maryland Department of Agriculture are using things like vacuums to suck up spotted lanternflies. And then on our right, we can use strong water sprays. This is recommended for sustainable control when it comes to a lot of our insects. One tactic we can use in combination with other ones, where say we have spotted lanternfly on the side of our house, we don't want them dripping honeydew down. We can use a strong water spray to encourage them to jump or fly away. Or if they're on one of our vulnerable plants, such as one of their favorite plants, maybe we have a young tree sapling like black walnut, or we have a prized grapevine in our home garden. We can use that water spray to encourage them to move on. Now that we've learned about some physical ways to remove the different life stages of spotted lanternfly or to exclude them with netting or trap them with the spotted lanternfly traps, we'll get into our different chemical controls. Now, before we use any sort of chemical pesticide, also known as an insecticide for our insects, it's important to educate ourselves before using these products and to let others know that they should educate themselves as well. Pesticides are generally recommended as a last resort after trying other management tactics. So you've tried other things, you still have lots of spotted lanternflies, and you don't want them in your landscape. Pesticides can harm pollinators, beneficial insects, and other non-target animals. So it's about weighing the risks. A lot of people tend to quickly use the pesticide before trying other management tactics. But when we're talking about sustainability and supporting our ecosystems, we have to be very careful before we apply a chemical. Consider all the options. Not all pesticides are the same, and not all pesticides are legal for home gardeners to use, even if they can be purchased, and especially purchased online. In the age of the internet, we can access lots of different types of items over the internet. And so just because you can purchase it doesn't mean you can legally apply it to your garden or landscape. To emphasize, we should not be applying home remedies. Even if we've learned from a neighbor or peer, they have a certain concoction they've used and they claimed it works. We should not be using these home remedies as they are not science-based, they are not regulated, and they could potentially harm our plants and non-target animals. We always want to read the entire chemical label. Any sort of pesticide that we purchase has a chemical label, and we need to read the entire label and follow all the directions before and during the application process. This is especially important as it pertains to our Maryland Pollinator Protection Act of 2016, which indicates that neonicotinoids, which are a type of pesticide, like the active ingredient dinotefrin, cannot be applied by home gardeners in the state of Maryland. It's not legal to apply neonicotinoids. Only farmers and certified pesticide applicators can legally apply this type of pesticide. So just because you can purchase, say, a neonicotinoid like dinotefrin online doesn't mean you can legally apply it. Now, active ingredients are on this chemical label. We have different common names of chemicals. So it may have a name like spotted lanternfly killer. We have to look at that label to see what type of active ingredient it is. And so on our right, we have a general or typical pesticide label. And where I'm pointing with that blue area is that active ingredient. And we see that active ingredient. If we're not familiar with it and what type of pesticide it is, we need to utilize a credible science-based source, such as the National Pesticide Information Center, to look it up, to see, especially in the state of Maryland, if it's a neonicotinoid. So if it is a neonicotinoid, we cannot legally apply it without a pesticide applicator's license. Now, we're going to go through pretty quickly a crash course on two different types of pesticides in terms of how they work. We're going to look at some charts by Penn State Extension. And for this one, we're going to look at contact versus systemic insecticides, specifically looking at how they kill insects. And especially today, we're talking about spotted lanternflies. So contact insecticides work by coming into the contact of the body of the insect. So they're sprayed on a particular surface or plant. And once the contact insecticide touches our insect, whether that be you're spraying directly on the insect or they touch the surface, this is how they work to kill it. Our systemic insecticides, wherever they're applied on the plant, however they're applied, they can be absorbed by roots, barks, or leaves and moving throughout that vascular system. So it's moving throughout the internal parts of our plant and can move through different areas of our plant. So this means our, say, spotted lanternfly lands on a plant where a systemic's been applied, feeds on that plant, gets some of that systemic pesticides, and is killed by it. So we'll take a look at some contact products that target nymphs and adults of spotted lanternfly. So we see this table here. On our first column, we have the active ingredient, that thing we should be sure we look up and educate ourselves on. Activity against spotted lanternfly in our middle column, and residual activity on our final column. And residual means how long it lasts within our systems, our landscapes. And these are contact pesticides. So remembering that these only work if they come into contact with the particular target insect. The top active ingredients, so our box outlined in blue, there's a reminder here that we should not apply these while a plant is in bloom. This is to mitigate the impacts or negative impacts on our pollinators, because if we're spraying it on our blooming flowers, our pollinator comes by, can come into contact with this pesticide and negatively impact the insect. So, general reminder with these particular active ingredients, a lot of them are broad spectrum, which means they can target or affect a broad array of insect species. These are not specific to spotted lanternfly. So where we're spraying them, if they get into contact with another insect, it could kill said insect, like our pollinators and our beneficial insect species. Our active ingredients highlighted on the bottom in green are reduced toxicity insecticides. So some products do have an organic label. Just because they're organic doesn't necessarily mean that they're greener, but when we're talking about these particular reduced toxicity insecticide options, they can have a lower negative effect when it comes to residual activity and how long or how much they impact our insects. So it just really depends on the active ingredient itself too. So we may be more familiar as a home gardener with some of these reduced toxicity contact insecticides like insecticidal soaps and horticultural or neem oils. I also wanted to make us aware of an active ingredient called deltamethrin. And this has been labeled as a spotted lanternfly killer spray. Could have other different common names. Again, really important to look at the chemical label, look at that active ingredient. So deltamethrin is a contact product, a contact pesticide. It is broad spectrum, like a lot of contact pesticides are, where they're killing a broad array of insects upon contact or ingestion. Can be harmful to humans, pets, or other animals if misused. So it's important to follow all label instructions, including personal protective equipment. Also a product we do not want to apply on blooming plants, or plants that are currently in bloom, I should say. We've learned about our contact pesticides. Now we'll take a look at some systemic products that are for adult spotted lanternflies. Now, up front, in the state of Maryland, as we've learned, we are not legally allowed to apply neonicotinoids without a pesticide applicator's license. All the active ingredients listed in this table, including dinotefuran and imidacloprid, are both neonicotinoids. So home gardeners cannot apply these. I bring this up in today's presentation because if we are to hire a pest control company or a landscaper that has a pesticide applicator's license, they are likely going to turn potentially to these systemic active ingredients. So it's important to be aware of this when you're working with a professional, asking about the active ingredients they're planning to use, educating yourself so you can make that option of what you want applied to your landscape. So with these systemic products, there's a degree of risk to our pollinators and beneficial insects, and this can vary depending on multiple factors, including type of active ingredient, application timing, plant species, and insect species. And so educating ourselves, weighing the pros and cons, and being aware of the non-target effects. So we'll take a look at a recent study that looked at potential risks to pollinators when using systemic products for spotted lanternfly, specifically those active ingredients we just saw, which are dinotefuran and imidacloprid. looking at whole flowers of tree of heaven and red maple. So they assessed acute mortality risk to bees from oral exposure to residues in these flowers for honeybees in a solitary bee species shown here. This is a type of mason bee. The results suggest potential acute risk to solitary bees, but more research is needed. So this just goes to show that there are non-target effects where we can be affecting our pollinators and other beneficial insects by the application of these products. Something we can also do is to leave spotted lanternfly for natural predators. You may be wondering if things are learning to feed on spotted lanternfly, and it has been the case. We are seeing things like owls, birds, spiders, and different predatory insects like our mantids and our wheelbug shown on our bottom right, and many others. There's a community science project done called Birds Biting Bad Bugs, which had people from the general public send in photos of different animals feeding on spotted lanternfly. And so the pie chart on our right shows the breakdown of the results of the different type of predators that they saw. Approximately 50% were arthropods, so insects, spiders, and other things. And approximately 41% were birds. So showing that many generalist predators feed on spotted lanternfly in North America. So as we know, there are multiple ways to manage spotted lanternfly, and there is no one size fits all approach. It's about assessing our specific situation. And it's also important to note and remind others that it's a personal choice to choose any of these management tactics. It's also a personal choice to take action as well. It is completely valid to also not take any sort of management tactic against spotted lanternfly. We can choose one, we can choose multiple. It also depends on the space that we're working with and our level of tolerance as well. As we've seen, spotted lanternfly is mainly a nuisance pest when it comes to our home and community gardens. So one way to really think about our situation and assessing the risk is there's this great table created by Penn State Extension that helps you assess the risk of your landscape. So on the left side, we see likelihood of impact, what plants are present, and along the top is severity, how many spotted lanternflies are present. So just one tool to help get you thinking and to assess your particular risk. So here are some main takeaways from today's presentation. Spotted lanternfly is an invasive insect that is spreading throughout Maryland in the eastern United States. Spotted lanternfly feeds on plant sap from a wide range of plant taxa, remembering that our spotted lanternfly cannot chew plants. They have a straw-like mouthpart. Spotted lanternfly feeding is a plant stressor that is not leading to plant death, except for with tree of heaven, grapes, and black walnut saplings, so our young trees. Spotted lanternfly excretes a sugary substance called honeydew, which can attract animals, grow mold, and damage and or stain surfaces. There are many ways to manage spotted lanternfly. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach, so it's important to consider your situation carefully before using a control method or multiple control methods. I will leave you off with some further spotted lanternfly resources. If you need a PDF of this, feel free to email me after watching today's presentation. I will now launch our post-presentation poll or survey if you're tuning into this live through Zoom, so we can see how our knowledge has changed. I want to thank you for watching today's presentation. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to contact me. We've got a few questions here. I've been seeing spotted lanternfly adults clustering on my driveway or the siding of my house. Is there a reason why they would be attracted to these areas? That is a great question. Not particularly sure. There could be shade or sun in that area that they're seeking out for whatever reason, whether they're hot or they're cold. There could be some sugary substance, maybe it's some leftover honeydew that's dripped down into those areas. I can't say for sure.
Does the instar stage, life stage of the spotted lanternfly take place underground?
No, so all life stages of spotted lanternfly take place above ground. So they're not similar to cicadas in that way. As we may know with our cicadas, the nymphal stages do take place underground or the immature stages. But when it comes to spotted lanternflies, all their life stages are above ground, including that nymphal immature stage.
I know it's early on, but has anyone seen plants develop defenses against spotted lanternfly?
Ooh, I haven't heard of this being recorded yet. There have been some suggestions or some preliminary findings that when spotted lanternfly is feeding on Tree of Heaven, they could be sequestering different toxins that are a part of the Tree of Heaven and maybe making the spotted lanternfly bitter to different predators. But more research is needed in this particular area.
Do the spotted lanternflies also make the loud sound like their relative cicada?
No, they do not make any sort of noise.
I was surprised to hear that SLF has been known to kill Tree of Heaven, a plant it likely co-evolved with. I wonder if SLF will begin to curb the spread of the invasive Tree of Heaven. Do you know if anyone has looked into this?
If you mean curb the spread by building up defenses, or I'm trying to think about this. So,
Like, I guess would more spotted lanternflies feeding on Tree of Heaven prevent them from spreading more?
that's a great question because they still have such a wide host range, and we have found they can survive solely on other species. So we have found that spotted lanternfly doesn't need a Tree of Heaven to successfully go through its different life stages, that it doesn't need spotted lanternfly necessary. So even if we had a landscape without Tree of Heaven, spotted lanternfly could still survive off of different types of plant species, such as red and silver maples.
If SLF was it first appeared in Maryland in Cecil County. How is it that the population is less than Central Maryland? More beneficial activity, question mark?
We're thinking it's a combination of different things. What we generally see with different types of invasive species is we see a peak and then a decline, and then it could be some sort of peak again. So with insects in general, their population cycles can be cyclic. So generally we see some sort of decline with our invasive insects after a peak, but it could come back. So it's going to depend on lots of different factors such as climate, potential disease, predation level. So it's common that we'll see this decline, but they could potentially come back in higher numbers. Really depends.
We've seen many SLF on black walnut. Are they benefiting from the black walnuts?
They're benefiting by feeding on them and extracting that sugary phloem substance, which they aren't only getting from black walnuts, but other different types of plants as well. So one of their favorites is black walnut, so that's probably why you're seeing them on there. We don't necessarily know why particularly black walnut might be a favorite, but just something we've observed so far.
What advantage is water spraying for
Advantages of,
SLF?
yeah,
Yeah.
great question. So this is a sustainable management tactic for not only spotted lanternfly, but any sort of insects that we want to physically remove from a surface or a plant. So say they're on the siding of our house, we can use a strong water spray to encourage them off the siding of their house if we don't want them there anymore, especially if we don't want them dripping honeydew down on a surface, or if we want them to move on from a particular plant. They do this naturally, but if we want them to get off of a susceptible plant, so one of their favorite plants as we've seen, or if they're on a black walnut sapling or another young tree, we want them to move on, we can spray them with that strong water spray to hopefully encourage them because they can fly and they're pretty jumpy as well.
Since some species feed on SLF, is not killing them a reasonable choice?
It is a choice. Yep. So we do have the choice to do nothing. It's interesting because there was a published study that looked at the community outreach efforts that were done in Pennsylvania, because that's where it was first found and had the highest populations of spotted lanternfly. where they killed, I think, don't quote me on this, I'd have to look back, but close to 1 million spotted lanternflies, and this did not impact their population levels. And so with a lot of invasive species, and we're talking about physically squishing them and removing them, they're generally not going to significantly impact their populations. It does something, and it especially does something, we're talking about our particular green space and our susceptible plants. So as a home or community gardener, you can choose to physically remove them from your landscape in some way. But we're talking about a bigger picture of the big population levels of spotted lanternfly. It really is going to depend, and typically we don't see a large impact, especially with squishing and removing. But when it comes to spotted lanternfly, it is really difficult to measure their population levels because they move so much. They move between plants, they move between habitats. So a lot of researchers are finding it difficult to really get a good record of what their population levels may be.
So we have two questions related to reporting. This is asking specifically, so even that spotted lanternfly is everywhere now, and even if you're in a quarantine area, should people be reporting their sightings?
Or yes, you should still be reporting it when you can. I spoke with the spotted lanternfly team at the Maryland Department of Ag, and I asked them this specifically because they used to have on their site that you no longer needed to report in certain counties of Maryland. They've removed this now. So no matter what county in Maryland you are encouraged to still report. Again, this provides us valuable data to know what time of year we're seeing certain life stages of spotted lanternfly, and gives us a very narrow view, but some sort of view of population level as well. We're seeing a lot of reports in a certain area that may indicate to us in different departments like Maryland Department of Ag to go out there and take a look at a certain site. So when you can, it's always good to report.
Can application of contact pesticides to plants, trees get onto honeydew that is then accessed by honeybees? Do honeybees use honeydew?
Yes, we have seen honeybees use honeydew, and what's really interesting is that there are some beekeepers that are selling and labeling this particular type of honey they produce from the honeydew as something special. I've heard spooky honey, I've heard dark honey. It apparently has a darker kind of smoky flavor to it when these honeybees utilize this spotted lanternfly honeydew. So if you've tried it, it's pretty interesting. I haven't tried it myself. When it comes to contact insecticides getting on the honey and potentially impacting our honeybees, it's really going to depend on the active ingredient. It is possible that it could impact our honeybees, but depending on that active ingredient, it's going to vary in toxicity levels. And so I encourage you to look up active ingredients, look at that National Pesticide Information Center webpage, and they have on there posted studies that have been done, and they usually test these active ingredients out on honeybees, both in a lab setting and a field setting. So you can take a look at that there.
Are spotted lanternflies poisonous if consumed? Tasty? Question mark.
So we haven't found them to be poisonous, but they potentially could be bitter with those suggested results that they might be sequestering different toxins from things like tree of heaven and potentially black walnut. More research is needed. We have observed different birds spitting them out. We have some veterinary reports where different dogs and cats might be puking them up or vomiting them up, but we don't have the evidence to say that they're generally toxic. So this is just observations that we've had so far.